Welcome back to the program. This is Animals Today. I'm Dr. Lori Kirshner, and we have a real treat for you today with a very special guest. Now, in preparing for the show, I did extensive research on celebrities who care about animals and their work and efforts and contributions to animal rights and animal welfare issues. And I have to tell you that our guest today is without a doubt one of the most serious, hands-on, and dedicated animal rights activists in the entertainment industry. And in just a minute, you're going to hear about only some of the many aspects of his work in animal rights. But before I introduce him to you, you must know that every day in the United States, tens of thousands of kittens and puppies are born. I want you to think about this and compare it to the 11,000 human births each day. That means that for every person born in the United States, about 15 puppies and 45 kittens are born. So you can see there's never enough homes for all these pets, right? Millions, listen to me, millions of healthy dogs and cats are killed in shelters annually in the United States. Over 50% on average of the animals that enter our country's shelters are euthanized. And in many of our cities' shelters, it's more like 70 to 80% of the animals that get euthanized. So if an animal enters a shelter, he has more of a likely chance of being killed than being adopted out. This senseless killing of our animals can be stopped by fixing our pets. Thousands of dogs and cats continue to be born in the United States while thousands of others are simultaneously being killed. And you know what? This is our fault. It's humans' fault that this senseless killing is happening. We allow them to be bred, and we allow them to reproduce by not fixing them. You can look at it this way. Every time a breeder or a pet owner allows their dog or cat to have a litter, then that person has taken away a chance for 4, 6, 8 homeless shelter dogs and cats from obtaining a home. And actually a more true statement would be when another litter is created, not only do you take away the chance of animals in the shelter from obtaining a home, but in reality the odds are you've taken away the chance for them to live. Fix your pets and encourage others to fix their pets and adopt and rescue and save a life. I'm Dr. Lori Kirshner. This is Animals Today on News Talk 920 KPSI. I'm very pleased to introduce you to my next guest, who all of us know from his long and successful television career. But you may not know about how deeply committed he has been to protecting the animals and animal rights issues. Mr. Bob Barker. Bob, thank you so much for joining us on Animals Today.
It's my pleasure, Lori, and you were deadly accurate in everything you have just said about spay and neuter.
Thank you, sir. Bob, we're going to cover the many aspects of your work in animal rights. So why don't you start by telling us, please, when and how you first became concerned about the welfare of animals?
Well, I've always loved animals as long as I can remember. As a small child, I had animals, and I grew up in a little town in South Dakota on the prairie called Mission, about 200 people. My mother and I lived in a hotel, which was the only 2-story building in town, and when Mother was looking for me, she used to go up some steps to the top of the hotel, to the roof of the hotel, and look for a pack of dogs, because I had dogs with me wherever I went in those days in Mission. And were they spayed or neutered? I don't think so.
Right.
There was no veterinarian in Mission. There was no doctor in Mission.
Right.
There was no electricity. There was no running water. There was no sewage disposal. We called it the Paris of the prairie.
Wow. Wow.
But I've always loved animals, and when I had the opportunity to be the honorary chairman of Be Kind to Animals Week in Los Angeles years ago, I accepted, and as a result, I was invited to participate in the activities of various organizations that were animal-oriented, and I did. And as I did, I became more and more aware of the terrible terrible exploitation and mistreatment of animals. And I just felt compelled to try to help rectify the situation, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
You took a very public stand, Bob, in what became known as the fur flap in 1987. Now, Bob, can you go back 22 years and tell us what that was about? Because we have listeners here, Bob, that are probably too young to remember, and this was if you don't know, this to my listeners I'm talking about, if you don't know, this was the biggest animal rights story ever, at least at that time.
Well, it was probably the best single thing that ever happened to the anti-fur campaign. I was hosting the Miss USA and Miss Universe pageants at that time, and I had become deeply concerned about the treatment of animals and the production of fur. And I asked the pageants to stop giving away fur coats as prizes. And they agreed in 1987 that they would stop in 1988. So I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1987 to do the Miss USA pageant. And I was horrified to learn that the swimsuit contestants were going to make their entrances wearing fur coats over their swimsuits, slip out of the swimsuits, and model for the judges. And I told the producers that I could not be on the stage surrounded by these women in fur coats because I'd gone all over the country speaking out against fur. And they understood my position, but they had contracts and they had hundreds of thousands of dollars in furs there. And so we talked about it over a period of 2 or 3 days, and it leaked to the press. And for the first time, for many people, they were reading about the terrible treatment and death of animals in the production of fur.
Right.
And here was this guy who was about to give up 2 very valuable shows, valuable in that they were produced income, on behalf of the anti-fur campaign. And it became what you have just described as the fur flap, and it was on front-page newspapers. It was a front-page newspaper story. It was on national television. It was on radio. And it, as I said, was the best thing that ever happened to the anti-fur campaign.
That's wonderful.
Eventually, the producers agreed to use fake furs, and we went ahead and did the show. But it really resonated throughout the fur industry, and I was the kicking. I was in every fur publication, the trade papers for years after that. They couldn't say enough unkind things about me, but I frankly was flattered by that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I was, in my mid-20s at the time, and I sure remember it. And I'll tell you, people around me, and I always had a heart for animals too, Bob, and tried to do what I can for educating people about animal rights. But I remember it very well, and I remember around me it really sparked people just to think about it. Think about how furs are made and how terribly cruel it is. And for the first time, people who are so ignorant to the fact about where furs come from made them realize. So it's wonderful. Now, Bob, the following year, there was more controversy which resulted in you leaving the pageant.
That's right.
Can you tell us what happened there?
Well, as I said, they had agreed they'd stop giving away the furs as furs as prizes in 1988. They agreed in 87. But when 1988 rolled around, they reneged, and I resigned from both pageants, and that was Fur Flap 2. They got a lot of publicity too, but not as much as the first time around. And it served its purpose. It helped in the anti-fur campaign.
Absolutely. Bob, over the past 2 decades, do you think the practices of the pageant regarding wearing or using furs have improved?
Well, I don't know whether they still use furs or not, but I know that game shows don't.
Right.
Years ago, I went to Mark Goodson when I was doing Price is Right and asked him to stop giving away furs on Price is Right, and he agreed. And we got so much positive publicity that I think that affected all game shows because they all stopped giving away furs, and maybe they just came to terms with the fact that it was cruel to to even consider furs as prizes. But in any event, I don't know of a game show that's giving away furs today, and I don't know whether the pageants do or not.
Do you encounter people who tell you that your actions at the time made them think twice about wearing furs?
Oh, yes. It's been years ago. It was 1987. It's been years ago, but I hear about it frequently, and particularly in interviews as we're doing right now. People who are aware of animal suffering, they bring it up all the time because it was undoubtedly an important part of the anti-fur campaign.
Anyone who watched The Price is Right knows how you sign off with a message urging people to spay and neuter their pets. Most of the Animals Today listeners understand that fixing our animals is essential to improving the huge problem of a pet overpopulation. Bob, do you feel that over the years the general public has begun to learn this lesson?
Oh, absolutely. If anything has made progress, it's the spay-neuter campaign. I started that on Price probably 30 years ago. I did the show 35 years. I would imagine I did that plug for about 30 of the 35 years. And during the 30 years, we have made great strides. And I think that plug on Price is Right was helpful, but it is the work of people across the country who have devoted their time, their energy, and their money to trying to convince people to have their dogs or cats spayed or neutered. That's what has really it's just swept across the country like a tsunami.
Yeah, Bob,
the first major city in the United States to have a mandatory spay-neuter ordinance passed was our own Los Angeles, right here.
Yes, isn't that wonderful?
Now it's happened in San Antonio, it's in Dallas, I think in Houston. I went to Chicago and spoke to the city council. They were considering one. I think it has passed now. They're even considering one now in New York City.
Bob, my show is not very popular amongst breeders since practically every show I do stress the importance of adopting from shelters and saving a life versus buying from breeders.
If you're unpopular with breeders, take it as a compliment.
Okay, well, I was just going to ask you, since this is very pertinent to the overpopulation problem, is irresponsible breeding, I was wondering if you had a position on the breeding of dogs and cats.
I have a position that's completely negative. I know that there are legitimate breeders who have licenses and who pay their taxes, and they're bad enough. But even worse are the backyard breeders and the puppy mills. The puppy mills are just horrible, and I think people are beginning to be more and more aware of this too. I think everything that we're trying to accomplish in the protection of animals begins with awareness. Americans love animals. I think more than 70% of the homes in the United States have at least one pet. But they love their own pet, but they don't know what's happening outside of their home. And what's happening is terrible so far as animal mistreatment is concerned.
And they just need to be educated.
That's right.
Bob, you endowed with a very large donation, I should add, a foundation called the DJ&T Foundation, which supports low-cost spay and neuter services and programs. Please tell us how that operates and how people access the services.
Well, it's named in memory of my wife and my mother. My wife's name was Dorothy Jo, and my mother's name was Matilda, but everybody called her Tilly, so I named it the DJ&T Foundation. And in their memory, they loved animals and helped animals themselves, and I know that they're pleased to have this be their name for them. And what it does is to subsidize spay-neuters of dogs all over the country through local organizations. The local organizations that qualify for an application, they send in an application and who qualify for a grant, they arrange for people who cannot pay for the surgeries to take a voucher to a local veterinarian, have the surgery performed. The local veterinarian bills that local organization, and then the local organization at the end of the month sends all of the bills to the DJ&T Foundation, and we pay a part or all of the surgery, depending on whether the person could afford to pay a copay of any type. And we've now have grantees in every state in the union and multiple grantees in many states, and they don't get just one grant; they can continue getting grants. And some of them have had as many as 10 or 12 grants over the years. And it's really done a lot, I think, to help in the overpopulation problem.
Welcome back to Animals Today. I'm Dr. Lori Kirshner, and we're speaking to Bob Barker and learning about all his incredible work towards helping animals and animal rights issues. Bob, you are also into education about animal rights in a big way, first in the law school, professorship, endowments, and more recently in supporting an undergraduate animal rights program. Please tell us first, if you would, about the law school chairs.
Well, I thought that it would be important, or is important, for these young law students to learn something about animal law. And I thought the best place in the country to begin would be Harvard. So I went to Harvard, and they not only accepted the idea, they were enthusiastic about it. And I established an endowment fund at Harvard Law School for the study of animal law. And it was so successful that it was written up in legal publications of all kinds. And I moved on, and now I have 8 endowment funds in 8 of the finest law schools in the country. And I am told that it has done more than any single thing to cause law schools to take animal law seriously, treat it with the respect that it so richly deserves.
So it's really inspiring a generation of lawyers interested in animal rights.
That's exactly what I'm hoping to do. And these lawyers are going to practice law, in which case they may have law cases involving animals, or they're going to maybe be judges, where it would certainly be important, or they'll go into politics, perhaps. And when they are in politics, they're in a position to create legislation, and that's what we need.
Right.
There's more legislation, and legislation that is really stringently enforced. But this was so successful with the law schools that I've started it now with my alma mater, Drury University in Springfield, Missouri. I established endowed a professorship in animal rights. And I was very fortunate to have Dr. McCarran, who I believe that you had on your show only a short time ago.
We did spoke with Patricia McCarran last week from your alma mater, Drury, and she holds, like you said, the new professorship in animal rights there, and it's just amazing what you've done. And
so that's the first undergraduate school to have such a program, and already they've had some inquiries from other colleges and universities, and I hope it spreads across the country. And I was so fortunate to get Dr. McCarran. She was a French teacher, and Drury lost a splendid French teacher, and now we have a professor of animal rights instead.
Last season of Animals Today, I had a chance to interview Dr. Paul Waldow, who is the Bob Barker Lecturer on Animal Law at Harvard. And
that's right. Paul Waldow is the Bob Barker Lecturer at Harvard. And he is a very knowledgeable young man, too, isn't he?
Oh, my goodness. We had a very wonderful, interesting discussion. Do you anticipate, and you have heard, I guess, about other undergrad campuses offering courses in animal rights?
No, there are none.
Okay.
I've started the first one at Drury, and I hope to have them all over the country, see them all. Although now I'm interested in, it is a community college, actually, up in northern New York. And I may establish an endowment fund up there and include a program which is the creation of a dear friend of mine, Nancy Burnett of United Activists for Animal Rights. She had this idea of having the PTAs, locally, regionally, and even nationwide, involved in some way in teaching and helping very young children to be more aware of the animals in this world, and to learn to respect them. And it's an idea that so many people with whom we've talked are impressed, that we want to get Christian groups and Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, and have them all in some way involved with animals. And we think we can have it spawned right there at this community college.
Oh, so wonderful. Bob, another strong interest you have is for the elephants, very social animals who too often, sadly, end up isolated in captivity. I know you've worked with the group called PAWS, Performing Animals Welfare Society. Please tell us a little bit about your efforts on behalf of the elephants.
Well, I have indeed worked for on various problems, and we have them right here at the Los Angeles Zoo. It's a beautiful, if you could use the word beautiful, it's a terrible example of how miserable an elephant can be, and that they have one elephant there now, Billy, who is living all alone in an area much too small for him, and suffering terribly as a result. They're very social animals, and for them to be alone is torture. And we got Ruby out of the Los Angeles Zoo. We got an elephant named Maggie out of the zoo in a zoo in Canada. I've forgotten the name of the city in Canada for the moment. But in any event, it's not only was Maggie alone, but she could not be outside much of the year. I think only 3 months of the year she could actually be outside. So she was alone in a small enclosure. And we got her out of there and got her to PAWS. We got a couple of animals out of the Midwest situation, elephants. I think I've helped them get 6 or 7 up there now at PAWS. And it's a wonderful place for them. It's the nearest possible thing, I think, for an elephant, the nearest possible thing to its natural habitat. They have acres and acres of land. They have a mud hole. They love to play in the mud. They have a pond for them. They have trees for them to tear up. Elephants love to tear up trees. They're just very happy up there. Yeah. Right now we're working on an elephant, another problem in Edmonton, Canada, named Lucy. Lucy's suffering terribly. She's alone up there.
It's so sad.
There are problems with elephants all over the United States.
I know. It's so sad. We once interviewed on Animals Today the head litigator of the lawsuit against the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus for their abuse against the elephants. But when I think about the elephants' natural ways, their instincts, their natural habitat, and then to keep them in captivity when they're normally they roam for miles, 25 miles a day. It's
up to 50 miles.
It's so cruel to think here they are, can't even turn around. Oh, it just bothers me so much.
All these circuses. I think circuses are coming to terms with the fact, though, that an elephant cannot possibly be healthy or happy in a circus.
No.
Zoos,
right.
the progressive zoos, the well-informed zoos are closing their elephant habitats.
The philosophy here on Animals Today, Bob, is to oppose the use, or I should say abuse, and exploitation of animals in any form of entertainment, such as zoos, like you mentioned, rodeos, and circuses. And I was wondering if you wanted to comment a little bit about the rodeos and circuses.
Well, rodeos and circuses are terrible abusers of animals, and they are obviously abusers of animals, but less obvious is the abuse of animals in movies. Animals are abused terribly. People go to movies who love animals. They go to movies with animals in them because they love animals and they want to see them. And they see them do these things and they think, oh, that's so cute. The animal has probably been terribly mistreated in order to make it do these things.
Right, right.
A wild or exotic animal in a movie has been mistreated.
Right.
Because you cannot control them without intimidation. And these animals are beaten unmercifully. Project X was a good example of that. Years ago, Project X had it featured chimpanzees, and those chimpanzees were brutalized. And we got the city to investigate, and they were ready to they wanted to press charges against 7 animal trainers, but the statute of limitations had elapsed. When you see this disclaimer at the end of the movie, where the American Humane Association says no animal was abused or killed in the production of this picture,
right,
don't you believe it?
Right.
It may be true, but in all probability is not.
Thank you. Your autobiography, Bob, entitled Priceless Memories, is doing very well. Why did you write it, and how did you find the time?
Well, I had never even planned to write a book, but an agent got a publisher for me, and they were ready to go. And so I said, all right, I'm going to write a book. And I wanted to write a happy book, and that's what it is. Priceless Memories is filled with all sorts of stories about The Price is Right and Truth or Consequences, my years as a naval aviator, back in college, by life on the prairie in South Dakota, things that people would not know about me who I hope might be interested in reading about. And it's a fun book. It's a happy book. I don't say anything derogatory about anything. It's not a tell-all or anything like that. It's just a happy book, and I hope that folks do enjoy it.
Yeah, and I just want
all of the proceeds from this book go to the DJ&T Foundation.
Thank you. I was just going to say that to my listeners so they know that all the proceeds, I want to repeat this, to Priceless Memories, Bob Barker's book, all the proceeds he donates to low-cost spay-neuter clinics all over, the DJ&T Foundation. Incredible. Bob, are you optimistic about the plight of the animals in the years to come? Sometimes I have to tell you I feel so negative reading and hearing about all the stories of abuse and neglect that people inflict on our animals.
Absolutely, I'm optimistic. I know that I've really been active on behalf of animals for about 35 or 36 years. And in that period of time, now of course that's more than 3 decades, but we have made tremendous strides. And I fully believe that the time will come when people will look back on us, and certainly the years in the past, as the Dark Ages. They won't be cutting up animals in vivisection. Will be a thing of the past. They won't be cutting up animals in laboratories across the country. Computers and various other methods are putting that out of business, I think, will put it out of business in the near future. And I think that circuses with animals will be a thing of the past. I doubt very seriously if many animals will be in, there are many animals that are not in zoos. I think things that have improved. We even look at fur. We were talking about fur. Fur is no longer chic. You don't see young women in fur now. You see matronly women in fur who have had them for years. We've made great strides.
Bob, would you like to say any concluding remarks to our listeners?
Well, I can't conclude an interview without reminding you to help control the pet population. Have your pet spayed or neutered.
You got it. Bob Barker, the best friend animals have ever had. Thank you so much for joining us on Animals Today.
Laurie, it's been a joy.